Learn how hell feels.
New Yorkers encounter this every day, going to work and school. Mentally ill people terrorizing others on the train, clearly in need of help. Recently, there have been high-profile cases of psychosis turning into violence.
President Donald Trump tweeted, "Long live the king." I'm here to say New York hasn't labored under a king in over 250 years.
The MTA tonight asking for $68 billion to fund its capital plan for subway improvements. And the head of the agency is turning to lawmakers in Albany for help.
We need to make sure that the structures, the tunnels, the elevated structures don't fall down, fall apart. We need to make sure that the power systems, which blew up recently a couple times in Brooklyn and Columbus Circle, are not left to rot.
They didn't feel safe riding the subways of New York City, and we had urged the governor to, instead of tolling people to try to force them onto the transit system, to instead make this city's transit system safe.
We'll roll out substantial additional improvements to our transit deployments to be even more responsive to the terrifying acts of random violence, because people don't feel safe in our subways.
The Trump administration's decision to rescind congestion pricing approval has ignited a heated debate, branding the initiative as backward and unfair, arguing that city access should not be restricted to the elite. As a result, New York City's revenue-generating congestion cameras will soon go offline, impacting the subway system. However, despite collecting over $1 billion annually through these cameras, the funds fell short of delivering the promised subway improvements. Critics of the decision, particularly progressives, lament the potential setback. Yet this might inadvertently benefit the subway in unforeseen ways. Every day, New Yorkers face harrowing encounters with individuals suffering from mental illness, some of whom have exhibited psychotic and violent behaviors on trains. Despite high-profile incidents and public outrage, solutions remain elusive. The MTA recently requested $68 billion for its capital plan, aiming to ensure the structural integrity of tunnels and power systems, some of which have catastrophically failed in Brooklyn and Columbus Circle. The public's plea for a safer, more reliable transit system contrasts starkly with tolling schemes that disproportionately burden commuters. Promises of enhanced safety deployments ring hollow amidst mounting fears over random acts of violence. The removal of congestion taxes, a widely despised initiative, is heralded by some as a victory for fairness and accountability, even though it deprives the city of funding. Skeptics argue this money was unlikely to address core issues, given the subway's staggering $20 billion annual operating cost, compounded by its role as a de facto homeless shelter. Billions already allocated for transit improvements have been squandered on ineffective measures, like anti-jump turnstile barriers and open gates that inadvertently encourage fare evasion. These shortcomings expose systemic inefficiencies, with studies showing that non-paying riders are statistically more likely to engage in criminal activities on the subway. Trump's intervention forces city officials to allocate existing funds more responsibly. Despite the MTA's historical failures to deliver on promises, leaders continue to push for more funding under the guise of modernizing infrastructure. Notably, outdated signal systems and unreliable escalators persist, symbolizing decades of neglect and mismanagement. For over a decade, New Yorkers have been assured that improvements were imminent, yet these pledges remain unfulfilled. The subway's decrepit state is not just a result of aging infrastructure, but a reflection of systemic apathy and mismanagement. While boasting historic architecture, much of the system relies on century-old technology. Leaders invoke the subway's age to justify endless budget hikes, yet these funds rarely translate into tangible improvements. The MTA's inefficiency is glaringly apparent. Unlocked doors expose sensitive equipment, symbolizing the broader neglect that pervades the system. The agency's inability to secure even basic operational elements breeds a culture of indifference, undermining public trust. Instances of stolen trains highlight the chaos and lack of oversight, further eroding confidence in the MTA's leadership. Critics liken the agency to a perpetually needy friend, repeatedly promising reform while misusing resources. Fare evasion costs the subway $800 million annually, nearly the same amount the cancelled congestion pricing scheme was expected to generate. This revelation underscores the flawed rationale behind the tolling initiative, which sought to offset revenue losses from fare evasion by taxing drivers instead of addressing the root problem. efforts to curb fare evasion remain inadequate. High-tech turnstiles and anti-jump barriers fail to deter determined evaders, and the city's reluctance to enforce fare collection exacerbates financial and safety issues. Criminal behavior on the subway often correlates with fare evasion, yet leaders prioritize costly, ineffective pilot programs over proven solutions like full-height rotating gates. This disconnect reflects a broader unwillingness to tackle systemic issues. Instead of using existing tools to address safety and revenue concerns, officials divert funds to ill-conceived projects, perpetuating a cycle of waste. The subway's persistent. Challenges reveal a troubling dynamic. The system's problems are less about technical limitations and more about leadership failures. As funding gaps widen and safety concerns escalate, the city's inability to enforce basic regulations or allocate resources effectively undermines public faith. The subway's decline is a microcosm of broader governance issues, where lofty promises mask a lack of accountability. New Yorkers deserve a transit system that prioritizes their safety and well-being, but achieving this requires a fundamental shift in leadership priorities and a commitment to meaningful reform.